President Biden's $2 trillion infrastructure package has run into a buzzsaw of opposition, not only from Republicans, but even from some Democrats. And the White House is already talking about negotiation and compromise. Joining us now, Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg. Mr. Secretary, welcome back.
Good to be back with you.
I want to start with a fact check of how the Biden administration is selling this plan. You all like to say that U.S. infrastructure is ranked 13th in the world, but our colleague Chuck Lane of the Washington Post did some interesting research. 3 of the nations ahead of us on that list are Singapore, Hong Kong, and the United Arab Emirates, which are tiny states and hardly comparable. Of the 10 largest countries geographically, including China and Russia, the U.S. actually ranks first. So, Secretary, not to say that everything's fine, but why not be straight about the actual conditions here in the U.S. to the American people?
Well, the American people already know that our infrastructure needs a lot of work. That's one of the reasons why there's such strong support for the President's American Jobs Plan. Look, the American Society of Civil Engineers rates our infrastructure. We've been getting a lot of C's and D's, but you don't need an engineering report to know that driving on American roads, they're not the way they should be, that our bridges need work. We've got thousands upon thousands that are in poor condition or even structurally deficient. If you go to U.S. airports and you compare them to airports in other countries, other developed countries, you know that the U.S. is not at a high standard. We don't have a lot of work to do to persuade the American people that U.S. infrastructure needs major improvement. The American people already know it, and that's one of the reasons why there's such extraordinary Republican and independent and Democratic support for this package among the American people.
Not necessarily in Congress, however. I want to give you another fact check. All of you in the Biden administration have been selling this plan as a huge jobs creator. Here you are just last Sunday.
The American Jobs Plan is about a generational investment. It's going to create 19 million jobs, and we're talking about economic growth that's going to go on for years and years.
But it turns out the study you're citing from Moody's Analytics says the economy will add 16.3 million jobs without the infrastructure bill and 2.7 million more with it. So it doesn't, as you said last Sunday, create 19 million jobs. Again, Secretary Buttigieg, why mislead folks?
Well, you're right. I should have been more precise. The 19 million jobs that will be created are more than the jobs that will be created if we don't do the plan. And it's very important to make this point. As you just showed us,
2 million more,
Moody's is saying that we will create 2.7 million. Yeah, exactly. It'll create 2.7 million more jobs than if we don't do it. And that's very important because there are people on this network and others saying with a straight face that this would somehow reduce the number of jobs. In fact, at least according to that Moody's analysis, 2.7 million additional jobs if we pass this package. Just further proof that it's good for the economy, and taken as a whole, it's going to add jobs compared to doing nothing.
But would you agree that you and the president and Brian Deese, the economic advisor on this program last week, you all exaggerated the jobs impact?
Look, there are a lot of different analyses about just how many million jobs this is going to create. I saw a Georgetown study. I think it said an investment of this type will create or save 10 to 15
Secretary, you're the one who cited Moody's Analytics as 19 million, and it's actually 2.7 million, which is a bunch, but it's not what you said.
It's part of a scenario that Moody's says will create 19 million jobs. But the bottom line is it's going to add jobs. And this is a direct refutation of people who are saying otherwise. So, yeah, you're right. I should be very precise. The difference in jobs that particular analysis suggests is 2.7 million more. That is a great place to be. Why wouldn't we want America to create 2.7 million more jobs? And I want to say something else about the jobs that's very important. the majority of them, according to a lot of the studies we've seen, will be for people who don't necessarily have college degrees. So at a time when you got a lot of blue-collar communities that are hurting, a lot of questions about the future of union jobs, construction jobs, manufacturing jobs, these are exactly the kind of jobs we need to be creating. And it's part of why, again, the American Jobs Plan has such remarkable support among Republicans, independents, and Democrats across the country. Maybe not yet in the Republican establishment here in Washington, but around the country, this bill is already enormously popular.
All right. But as you said, it's not enormously popular in Washington among Republicans or even among some Democrats. I'm going to get to that in a moment. But the president seems to recognize that. He has said that he's going to meet tomorrow with a number of members of Congress, both parties, both houses, in the Oval Office. Question. Are the size of the package, $2.25 trillion, are the way to pay for it, raise the corporate tax rate from 21% to 28% to raise $2 trillion in taxes over 15 years? Are all of those negotiable?
Well, I think the president will have an open mind and be interested to hear other ideas on every dimension of the package. But as he said, doing nothing is not an option. And we also can't wait too long. So he's got an expectation of major progress in Congress by Memorial Day. But of course, a plan gets better when you take input on board from our party, from the other party, from both houses. And that's the process that's underway right now.
Well, let's talk about that, because you do have defections already from the Democratic side. Democratic Senator Joe Manchin says he's not willing to go to 28% tax increase. He wants to go to only 25%, which means you wouldn't raise nearly as much money. He also says he opposes the idea of reconciliation, jamming this through on a straight party line vote. And then there is Senator Chris Coons, who's very close, from Delaware, who's very close to Joe Biden. He said this week.
I do think that there is an opportunity here for us to come together around a smaller package. And by smaller, I mean hundreds of billions of dollars that is directly targeted at hard infrastructure.
So he's not talking about $2.25 trillion. He's talking about hundreds of billions. Don't you have to go back to the drawing board, Secretary?
Well, I certainly don't think we have to go back to the drawing board, given that the American people want this to happen. I mean, we got 2/3 of the American people, often Republicans, supporting the provisions in this plan when you break them down. That tells us we're on the right track. Of course, there are different shapes this can take in terms of the legislative packages. Of course, there are different ideas about exactly how to target the programming or exactly how to fund it. And that's the conversation that's underway right now. It's what a negotiation is. But there's certainly, I've got tons of respect for Senator Manchin, Senator Coons, others who are bringing forward ideas in the Senate. We got some fellow Democrats in the House who are saying this isn't big enough, you got to do more. We're going to find the right path, but I think what the president has laid out, and so far it's still the most specific proposal that we've seen here in Washington, is a really, really well thought out proposal, and that's why America wants it done. I mean, it's very rare to find any legislation that this high of a proportion of Republicans, independents, and Democrats across the country believe we ought to pass. So that tells us we've got to be on the right track here.
Secretary Buttigieg, thank you. Thanks for coming in today. Always good to talk with you, sir.